Hi, welcome to Lachlan Likes a Thing, a show where I take a thing and see whether or not I like it. Now the thing we're looking at in this video is the Bang & Olufsen H3 dynamic driver in-ear earphones. Now in this video we're going to have a look at the build quality and the sound quality of the H3, and then I'm going to give you a comparison to an earphone which I think is in a similar class to the H3. Now the Bang & Olufsen H3 is something of an aspirational purchase for me because ever since I started learning about design in high school, I've been absolutely fascinated with the amazing designs Bang & Olufsen have come up with for their speakers, for their televisions, and even their telephones, and I've always wanted to own a Bang & Olufsen product. Now in recent years, Bang & Olufsen have started to market towards a younger audience by releasing products under the Beoplay brand name, and the H3 is the company's first in-ear earphone in that range of products. Now it retails at a recommended retail price of $249 US or 299 Australian dollars. And while that isn't cheap, for a company that's famous for releasing $85,000 televisions, it actually seems remarkably reasonable. Now let's have a closer look for what we actually get for the money. One of Bang & Olufsen's signatures is precision metal crafting, and the earpieces of the H3 show this off in style. They look and feel beautiful with these tiny pinprick vent holes and detailing which is pretty exquisite. One disappointment though is that the driver capsule appears to be made out of 3 different parts, most of them plastic. B&O didn't craft the nozzle out of a single piece of metal like some other premium or even some cheaper earphones, and as a result this part of the earphone feels less durable and less fancy. The cable on the H3 is not detachable and comes with a simple 3-button remote for Apple devices. The cable itself is also a bit of a disappointment. It's a bit thin and not very supple, meaning that it tends to retain memory and develop ugly kinks, especially when you use the nice cable winder case that Bang & Olufsen provides. There are no strain reliefs at all on the Y splitter, which is worrying, and the straight angle jack on the other end feels a little insubstantial. Overall build quality is okay, but you would expect better given the brand and the price. One thing to note is that Bang & Olufsen offer a 3-year warranty on the H3, and given that they have retail stores in some major cities around the world, getting good after-sales service from B&O would probably be easier than most other brands. The Bang & Olufsen H3 has a half earbud design, and that means you cannot wear it with the cable going up over the back of your ears. You have to wear it with the cable going down like a traditional earbud, and that means that noise from the cable, while it's not severe, it is somewhat of an issue. The other thing about the H3 is that even though I find it a comfortable earphone, most of the earpiece does rest in your outer ear, and depending on the shape of your ears, you might not find it that comfortable. The other issue with the H3 is that with this many vents on the back, you would expect external noise isolation not to be great, and it isn't. You can pretty much forget about using the H3 on a bus or a train. It's going to let in a lot of external noise and you're just not going to enjoy it. So the H3 is really well suited only for quiet environments. So how does the H3 sound? Well, in a word, natural. The H3 has a definitely inoffensive character. It's very much an all-rounder. It's just a bit warmer than neutral with quite a substantial bass response, but I think clearly Bang & Olufsen have done their homework with the tuning, because the H3s have a warm, pleasant kind of musical sound that I think most people would enjoy. Now, one really nice aspect of the H3 sound is that they have quite a relaxed and open soundstage, and that might be because of the extensive venting on the back. They aren't quite as absolutely open and spacious as something like the Sony EX1000, but I think Bang & Olufsen have done a good job of balancing getting a substantial bass response with a quite spacious sounding earphone. Now there are 2 issues that I can point out with the sound of the H3. The first one is that at times the treble on the H3 can get somewhat sibilant, and that means that the S sounds are a bit pronounced. Now it's not severe on the H3, it's certainly not as bad as some earphones that I've heard, but it is something to watch out for. You can tame the sound of the sibilance a little bit by changing out the stock tips on the H3 with Sony hybrid tips with a smaller aperture, and I find the hybrid tips a little more comfortable anyway. Now my other issue with the H3 is that I think at this price range it lacks a little in terms of clarity and definition, and this is especially true in the bass regions where I think the bass on the H3 can at times sound a little blunted and a little bit uncontrolled. Now it's not completely bloated bass, but again I've heard earphones at around this price or at cheaper prices where the bass is a lot tighter and more controlled. Now I mentioned at the beginning of this video that there was an earphone that I was going to compare the H3 to, and it's the HiFiman Re400. Now, this is an earphone that I've reviewed before. I think it's an absolutely stunning earphone, especially for the price of $99, and I highly recommend it on that basis. Now, I bring up the Re400 because I actually think it sounds very similar to the H3. Now, the H3 sounds a bit bassier than the Re400. In terms of sibilance, it's a little more sibilant than the Re400. In terms of sound staging, it's a bit more open and natural, but the Re400 I think sounds tighter and cleaner than the H3, especially in the bass region. Now, for $99, I think the Re400 is actually a bit underpriced, and again, it's one of the best options on the market. In contrast, I think the H3 is a little overpriced for the sound quality that you get. Now, by no means is the H3 a bad sounding earphone. I do think that it is on a similar tier to the Re400, and that's a good place to be. But the H3 is definitely one of those earphones where I can listen to it for hours and hours and quite enjoy the sound, but once I put it up against something else like the Re400, I can't help but feel a little disappointed for the price of the H3. So overall, for the price, I can't really recommend the H3. I think it's a good sounding earphone, but the lack of external noise isolation means that it's not a particularly practical design. In terms of build quality, I think there are aspects of the build quality that are questionable at this price point. And in terms of sound quality, while I think it's a good sounding earphone, I think it could be a bit cleaner and tighter. Now, all that said, I don't think it's a bad earphone, and definitely if you are after an open sounding kind of natural and relaxed all-rounder earphone, you could definitely do a lot worse than the H3. But at the price, as I said, I can't really recommend it. Now, I do have a review up of the HiFiman Re400, the earphone that I mentioned, and that's linked in the description of this video, so check that out if you're interested. Click the like button if you found this review helpful. And thanks to everyone who's liked my other videos and subscribed to my channel. You can talk to me on Twitter at LachLikesAthing or on Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing, and happy listening.